Dylan Ratigan, thank you so much for taking the time to be on our Easy Day series. You've got a phenomenal background. And so just touch on for me, from journalism to on air to writing a book to CEO of multiple companies, like how did you span this process? And how did you get to where you are today?
I believe that not just for me, but I think my one lesson is, I don't say lesson, the distinguishing characteristic between those who are able to have success in multiple domains or not is your tolerance for uncertainty.
Yeah.
And one of the human reflexes is to try to always secure certainty. I want to get married. I want to buy a house. I need to have a job. Even you and I have talked previously about people that have made small fortunes,
right,
and they still don't have a tolerance for uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so I believe one of the things that has served me well is I have an extremely high tolerance for uncertainty, where I can be in a situation where my economic situation is uncertain,
yep,
my housing situation is uncertain, my everything in my life, the country where do I live is uncertain. And I still sleep well, and I still have the confidence, not necessarily that I'll always figure it out, but that everything will ultimately work out for me in a good way.
It's a great definition, and I'll transition quickly into, we're in the events industry,
yeah,
and we do event security,
yeah,
crowd management, et cetera. So we live in uncertain.
Exactly.
Right? I could throw you in the ops center with a bank of TVs and a radio, and you could direct people tomorrow,
right,
to solve problems, right? I mean, and that's what we do for a living. So speaking of events, I mean, listen, you're different.
But I want to talk about that for a second, because I have only a small understanding of your business, but I admire what you're doing tremendously, because when you're dealing with huge crowds of people in huge environments, by definition, you're in a permanent field of uncertainty.
Right.
So also because I have a relationship with Wall Street, and Wall Street is a permanently uncertain environment. And so when the type of success that you've achieved with your business, by definition, means that you are skilled and comfortable being uncertain yourself. You're so much more powerful when you know that you don't know.
Yes.
And you're at so much more risk when you think that you do know. And when you teach people, you don't know. And so you have to create the ability to adapt to optionality. You need resilience and optionality in order to function in an uncertain environment. And I believe that the single greatest skills that we must teach each other and help those that are younger than us and older than us and all this is get comfortable with uncertainty. And I mentioned this previously. The only way that you can be comfortable with uncertainty is if you have some spiritual aspect of your life. Right. If you believe you need to control outcomes outside of yourself to be okay, you're going to have a big problem.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable understanding that you can't control the outcomes outside of your life, but whatever the outcomes are outside of your life, maybe you get rich, maybe I've made a lot of money in my life. I've also lost a lot of money in my life. Through outcomes outside of myself. It's a spiritual test to achieve economic success. Yep. It's a spiritual test to endure economic loss. It's a spiritual, money is one domain, but I can't emphasize enough the critical aspects of resilience and optionality and a spiritual core in yourself as a man or a woman to be comfortable with uncertainty. And I believe one of the most damaging thing in our society right now is this constant reaching for the perceptions of uncertainty, that once I have this car, once I have this house, once I have some outcome outside of myself,
right,
that then I will be okay.
Right.
As opposed to just, you are okay by virtue of your existence right now.
Right.
And then those outcomes will come and go.
Drop the material outcomes.
Enjoy them.
Yeah.
But they are not. But don't identify with them.
Right. Right.
I love a boat.
It's a great.
But if I don't have a boat, it's not the end of the world.
Well, I'm going to take you on the boat tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's a great definition. In my company, I do a monthly all hands. I'm going to play that clip for them.
Yeah.
Because that's what we have to do.
How can you possibly secure the Super Bowl?
Right.
And be certain?
Yeah.
You're managing a definitively uncertain environment, so you have to structure for resilience and optionality.
Yep.
And also awareness.
Yeah.
Right. So you're anyway.
No, you're 100% right. Like, we have to live in the gray, right? There's no, you go in black and white. Here's the plan. It changes the second you start, right?
Okay.
So, but let's talk about events.
Okay.
You're different from most of my guests. Most of my guests come because they're in my industry. They've run stadiums or they've run events or whatever. You don't come from that background, but you clearly understand it. So give our listeners just a little background, like where is your understanding on the events industry?
I mean, my first experience was I host events. I'm talent.
Sure.
Right. So I mean, I've done live television shows. Probably the biggest event, probably 10,000 people. I've never had more than 5 to 10,000 people in a room.
Yep.
But I've hosted many events with 5 to 10,000 people. So I understand just the mechanics of getting a bunch of people into of having a venue, filling the venue, securing the venue, exiting the venue, and more important than just the basic comfort and security of the venue, making sure that the people in the venue have a great time.
Yeah.
And
you clearly have a knack. You understand production.
Of course.
Right. You've been behind the camera. You understand what it takes to put a show on.
Sure.
And put the event on. And you've seen everything that goes on that people don't see on the camera.
Exactly. In addition to that, because one of the things that I took advantage of when I was in the television business was I got myself into a rock and roll band called the Fountains of Wayne, which they won a Grammy for a song that was a hit when we were much younger called Stacy's Mom. And so I was touring around the country with them at Webster Hall and the Beacon Theater, all these things. So the point is that there's nothing more exciting than a large event. And one of the most exciting things about a large event is actually to be behind the curtain, in backstage or in the security room or in the production room and all of those things. But again, success in the events business is destined to go to those who are comfortable not knowing what's going to happen, but being comfortable with the fact that no matter what happens, that they know that they will have the resilience and optionality to make the best of it.
We'll tell story after story on that subject at dinner.
Not to be a broken record on
or on the boat.
Yeah.
I just listened to you talk about 9/11, and 9/11 changed the world. It significantly impacted our industry because it changed security measures at airports, at stadiums, et cetera. But talk about it. You were on air, and you lived in that city. I don't know if you're actually a New Yorker, but I'll call you a New Yorker during that time. How was 9/11 different for somebody that was on air and having to report what was happening and a resident of New York compared to the rest of us? I was in my home in Atlanta watching, shocked, but you had a completely different perspective.
I'm going to take you to the next level. Forget me or Rachel or whatever. One of the things that we did at Bloomberg, where I was working at the time, after September 11th, so September 11th happens. The planes hit the buildings. Most of the people in those buildings got out of those buildings.
Right.
Most of them. They got out by walking down the stairs. The people that walked down the stairs of those buildings became my colleagues for the next 3 months because they were all Bloomberg clients and they didn't have any place to work and we had excess square footage.
Wow.
And so we reached out to them and said, you can work in our office.
Wow.
And I worked on an open trading floor with 200 people who had just walked out of the building, who were then sitting next to me on the desk. My friend, you want a banana, you got a coffee, like just working. And it's one layer to be a New Yorker whose friends are dying. I'm describing the death of my own friends.
Sure.
Even though I didn't necessarily know that they were going to be dead until a few hours later. But the people in the building are the only people that didn't see what happened.
Yeah.
They're the only people that never watched the buildings collapse. And so they were actually in some ways less affected. It's almost like you're more affected to be in Atlanta or in California or in Paris or in Tokyo watching, because the further away you got from it, the bigger it felt. And the closer you were to it, it was just a staircase for them.
Yeah.
Or for us, it was just New York that day. And so it was interesting because the closer you were to it, the smaller it felt. And I wouldn't say smaller. It didn't have any of the political aspects to it. It wasn't an attack. It was just a terrible, horrible, very bad, no good day.
Yeah.
For me personally, it changed my life forever because I was in a peer group. We were in our late 20s at the time. We had kind of had New York City was in this beautiful moment of prosperity and opportunity, and we were too young and inexperienced to know the difference. And so for me and for a lot of my friends, even we're friends to this day, Rachel and I, but also there's a bunch of us that are still friends. It was a loss it was basically, I lost, let's say I was born at one point, I became a man at another point, I got a job at another point. On September 11th, I lost my innocence.
Sure.
Permanently.
Yeah.
And it changed my perspective on life, period, forever. Having nothing to do with the war, the invasion, none of the political consequences, but just the idea that my friends can die today.
Yeah.
And we're 28 years old.
Right.
And not just 30 of them in one shot. And that changes your life forever.
Yeah.
And it also, I think, it makes the traumas in my life have continually made me a better listener, a kinder person, and a more compassionate person in general because of my awareness of how fragile and beautiful life actually is, and how the quality, part of my job as a human being in this life is to have a positive interaction with other people.
I got to watch you on, the previous show with my fiance Rachel, and then sitting here with you. You're a very complex, very intellectual, well-spoken individual, and I say that as a compliment. I've only heard some stories about you prior to this morning, and it's great insight to provide to any listener. That sort of intellect, and you boil it down to a pretty common sense approach. So kudos.
Thank you.
So
people I hate to go back to it. Uncertainty is the thing with uncertainty is, without uncertainty, there's no opportunity.
Right.
So when you lock it, so you have to have, yes, there's a risk with uncertainty.
Sure.
But also, you'll never buy a reservations.com. You'll never start an Italian sneaker company.
Right.
You'll never expand into canine or whatever. It's only if you allow space for uncertainty. You'll never meet Rachel and fall in love. You'll never have a new love affair. You'll never have these new experiences if you don't have the tolerance to live in the uncertainty.
100%.
To open the space to allow new people and new opportunities to come into your life. And so I just really, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we tell young people that what are you going to do? Where are you going to, we need to tell people it's very, very okay for you not to know.
100%. Yeah. I mean, look, I have a 25 and a 26-year-old.
Yeah.
And I'm,
So
I have a 13-year-old future stepdaughter. So it's very interesting. Without going through your whole media background, but you've hosted shows. Obviously, you're on Bloomberg that morning of 9/11. Are you an activist?
No. I was an activist. I was a political activist between 2009 and 2018. So what is that? I spent 9 years of my life as a political activist at a fairly high level in direct interaction with the President of the United States, the Cabinet of the United States, the Congress of the United States, and I ran for Congress and published a book that was a New York Times bestseller and had big audiences and all those things. So I've lived as an activist, and it was one of the most unpleasant periods of my life ever, and I don't recommend it. Because I believe the most activist thing you can do is be nice to the people around you. The problem with the challenge for activists is you get sort of vested in your ego, especially when you get some people, if they agree with you, they're like, go get them, you got them, I agree with you. You're like, they're with me,
But
know?
it becomes so insular.
But not only that, but then you really start to identifying yourself with the fact that you are more important, that you start to believe that your opinion or your voice is more important than other people's opinions and other people's voices because your voice is louder or because you have more support. And I believe that is a very dangerous place to live a life.
I can, listen, I've made that mistake in my own life. I can remember those days when I thought this is the only way to do
You know how it is.
100%. And
if everybody just does what you said, everything would be perfect.
Easy. Like,
we all do that. We've all had that moment.
I had a client tell me one day, I was walking into a meeting, and relatively experienced in what I'm doing, and I'm dealing with much younger people that are trying to tell us how to do things. And he walks me into a meeting, and right before he looks at me, he says, "I need you to learn how to say no nicer," because I would
You have
get
this disgust.
these crazy questions, and I'd
Like,
be
what are you, a bunch of idiots?
Again with the crazy question? Like, I've done this 100,000 times. That won't work. Anyway, what is media's
But
role?
that's a spiritual practice, by the way.
For sure, I had to learn.
Right? Like the fact that you can even allow yourself to feel that initial frustration and process it and not emote it, which is something that I go through myself, I
Right.
think is part of the spiritual experience.
Well, and I think if you push yourself to learn more and start a sneaker company, you get outside of your comfort level, and now you have to open your ears.
know that
and
I
start.
don't know.
Exactly.
Although now I know what vulcanization is.
I couldn't even tell you what
Or another-
vulcanization might be.
Yeah.
What is media's role in society today? Like, go back. You when you were on air in various roles, media was one thing to the public. Compare it then to what it is today.
Media now is a profit center for the monetization of attention.
Is it controlled by a few people that have all the coins in the world?
No.
Okay.
It is a algorithm that is feeding each individual the content that will most readily acquire their attention.
Not necessarily the truth.
Because nothing is for sure not the truth.
Right.
But I think we're at a really dangerous moment in the sense that it used to be there was some shared pool of information with sports is a nice thing to look at, because you and I can watch a Miami Heat basketball game.
Right.
And when the game is over, there will be no debate as to whether the Miami Heat won or lost, because there'll be a set of numbers, and you'll say the Miami Heat won, and I'll say I agree, the Miami Heat won.
Right.
And then I'll say the reason that they won is because this and this and this, and you say that's not why they won. They won because of this, this, and this.
Right.
And so we can argue about why they won.
Yep.
But we can't argue if they won.
Right.
But what's happened with political content and non-sports and non-financial content is we've entered a world where we don't even agree on whether the Miami Heat won or not.
Right.
And once you split away from some shared set of facts, which is where we are in this country right now and really around the world, you're in a very dangerous place, because you have the empowerment of each individual with the certainty that they're right. Going to our thing, if you just do what I say, everything will be right.
Yep.
Whether it's whatever the extreme political point of view is, and you're losing the humility of people saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
And not knowing is a much more, but imagine if you're in your security business, if everybody was sure they knew where all the risk was.
Yeah.
How dangerous is it if you have a staff of security, if you have a security environment where everybody in the environment before the event happens is not doing any surveillance, they're not collecting any information, because they're absolutely sure that they already know where the risk is in Yankee Stadium,
Yep.
as opposed to going to Yankee Stadium and saying, I have no idea where the risk is in this building, and so I have to have a set of practices that allow me to take new information that might indicate where risk could be.
Yeah.
And now with the media, we've empowered an idea where people have this false certainty and selective outrage that is extremely counterproductive. But again, the solution is not, because I'm sort of betraying my own advice. I don't want to sit here and criticize what exists. I think the most important thing is for me to be the more I can be a better person myself, the biggest contribution I can make to the world is to be a better person myself.
I love that. I love that you brought up risk. Traditionally in our business, risk assessment, probability, impact, analytical, somewhat subjective. We don't have that anymore. We do to a certain extent, but I've thrown that out in what we do, because the socioeconomic, the political, the individual that's come back with PTSD or has whatever going on in their home, I believe is our biggest risk in our industry around the world. It could be, look, we had the United Healthcare CEO gunned down, this guy had a reason, right? We just had the shooting at 345 Park Avenue, the NFL headquarters, and this guy had a reason. What is media's role? Where do you think, what can be done to help settle these socioeconomic and political issues so that we can minimize this risk in this world that we live in?
The most extreme behavior, which is young individuals, typically men, going to murderous violence as a solution for a perceived problem. Like I said, that's the most extreme expression of social decay, can only be managed by a cultural shift that pays attention to them.
Right.
Right? It's the because isolation plus broken media equals murder at its most extreme.
Sure.
And so I think the more that we can participate in a culture that, so on the margins, all of us tend to say, we pay attention to with our wives, our fiance, our family, our friend, but we don't pay that much attention to people that we don't know.
Right.
And so just a 5% increase in marginal kindness to strangers, I believe would be a huge change. I also do believe you have to understand specifically that young men are in need of more attention, and young male energy cannot be stopped. It must be directed in a constructive way.
Yep.
Either young male energy will be destructive or it will be constructive. And if you don't organize it in a constructive way, it will naturally become destructive. And so the more we can invest in creating constructive outcomes for young men, things that have meaning and purpose for them, the more you reduce the destructive aspects in society.
It's a great answer. Last question. This is our Easy Day series. We talk about this as a slogan of the SEALs, right? Whatever the situation, it's an easy day. What was your easy day? If you had to pick one thing in your career, your life, personal, professional, where it was just the hardest day that you've dealt with, but what was it and what were the lessons learned?
And I would say it was 60 days. And in those 60 days, I found out that my business partner had taken all the resources from the business. And my wife at the time had taken what was left of the resources. When my wife found out that was happening, took the balance of the resources. So I went from having a tremendous amount of resources to having, and what I thought were allies and a wife, to having very little resources and found out that the person that was closest to me was actually my greatest adversary. And the lesson was to remember that regardless of the resources or the people in my life, that as long as I can center myself on a spiritual level, that I will be able to continue to go forward.
Love it. Love it. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
It's been a great honor to get to know you, and I look forward to more.
Me too.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate it.